Welcome to episode 17 of Ozhead's podcast, and we're coming to you from a very special place in Nashville called Smokers Abbey. It happens to be one of my personal favorite retail tobacconists in the country. Everything's an eye full of decor, character. It's a vibe. You got to check it out. And we're joined by our special guest, one Rev Joshua Stump.
Hello, how are you? Thank you guys for being here. What an honor.
Well, this is great. I remember we did a event, behind the blend event over here, and it was great. The customers were awesome. It was a really great vibe. So you expanded, because I remember when you started, I mean, you pretty much doubled the space, I think. Yeah.
Double the space. It's basically you either starve to death or you find a way to eat. And so we are trying to find ways to eat.
Backtrack a little bit, because obviously we've been friends for a decade.
Yeah.
But for people that don't know you that are watching, just kind of give us a little background intro story to Josh.
Yeah, background intro story to Josh. Well, so my background was basically in music and nonprofit work. So I essentially first started out like doing youth work for troubled youth. And then I got into music because it was a good segue to connect with young people. And then I planted a church. So I was a pastor for a long time. I was a spiritual director, trained through the Franciscans. And it was, it's been kind of a crazy journey. And then I thought it would be cool when I turned almost 40. I realized that I had a lot of good stories and no money. So I was like, I need to start something that can maybe provide for my family, and I didn't really start that journey until I was 40. So I thought, cigars. I love cigars. Cigars are a good way to connect with people. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure it's super easy to make money with cigars. And so we opened up the shop in 7 years of absolute hell on earth. And then we started making a little money.
When did you open the Abbey?
2013. July of 2013.
11 years.
Yeah, 11 years. That's
so
right.
True story. Like Josh came onto my radar through a mutual friend, Grant Batson, who sent me an email and said, hey, my buddy, Josh is thinking of opening a store in East Nashville. What do you think of that idea? I said, fantastic. Because back then, East Nashville wasn't what it is today, obviously, right? There's been a lot of explosive growth. But what's funny about the email is he sent me a picture of you and you were wearing like this costume.
I was wondering if you remembered that.
I remember this. It was like one of these furry costumes and you were like dressed like a bear or something like that.
No.
What was
the story's actually better than this.
Okay.
It was Halloween and my kids were little and we were going trick-or-treating and I needed to have a costume. My wife said, you need to have a costume. And so when we're having this conversation, I was smoking a 4 Kicks.
Yes.
It had just come out.
Wow.
But roughly within a year. There. Yeah,
so I was smoking a 4 Kicks and I'm looking at the cigar and I said, you know what? I'll get me a costume. So I put on brown, which is why you're thinking bear. It was a brown sweatsuit, and I made a band that wrapped around my belly that was the 4 Kicks logo.
Oh, wow.
So I actually dressed up as the 4 Kicks cigar to go trick-or-treating with me.
See, in my mind, I never saw the band because I think your belly was covering the band.
You just saw my beautiful round body.
I saw the brown.
Bears.
I thought he's a bear.
It's very easy.
That's interesting. He's into that furry thing.
So how did you come up with I assume that you came up with the logo. Your logo is like a really cool logo. Can you talk, very memorable?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, so the name's Smokers Abbey, which Abbey is a more European, British term for a church. And at the time, I was just thinking, I really would like to create a space that is open and inviting for people to, our catchphrase is find rest for your soul. So for me, the concept behind the Smokers Abbey was, how do we create a space that unifies people, gives them an opportunity to rest and be disconnected. And of course, during the concept of this, not only was I still involved with ministry work, but I also had little kids. So for me, the cigar time on the porch at night was my time to disconnect. I used to call it third life.
Mm-hmm.
So first life, you go to work, you make money. Second life is when you come home and you got to work again, but that work is in the context of taking care of your family. And then third life is when we don't get to work. That's when kids and the wife and everybody's asleep and it's quiet. That's when I would go out and smoke cigars. So that was a big impression for me of like finding respite, a place to chill, to gather your thoughts, your plans for the next day. So the concept of Smokers Abbey was that. And then of course, because we're in East Nashville, it's a very diverse culture, both of financial state, race relationships, religious. So I was like, where can we get Black, white, Hispanic, poor, rich, atheist, faith people all together in unity and build a culture of rest and connection to humans? So for me, it's always been a bit more about the community and the connection than it has that it's about the cigars. I love cigars, but that's why I hire people like Nate, who is a rain man of tobacco and can tell you that every little thing and how much sun it got and what region. He wakes up every morning and reads the press, the news about cigars. He's always keeping me informed of what's going on. So it works because he gets to be the nerd and I get to do the relationship thing, which is really what I'm passionate about, is the connection to people.
Do you remember the first premium cigar you ever smoked? And it didn't have to be a 4 Kicks. It could be whatever.
No, I remember the very, very, very first one was a CAO Gold.
There you go.
That I bought at Bellmead Tobacconist.
That was my dad's favorite blend.
It was a CAO Gold. And the second one, I think, was the Alec Bradley Black Market, maybe. Because I tried something really light. And then, you know, my buddy who was smoking cigars at the time was like, oh, now go on the other spectrum, try something more full bodied. And so I think those were probably the two. I tried to dabble a little bit in the sweet stuff, but I never enjoyed that as much. But there's a market for that.
How long did it take for you? Because when I was reading about you, you said that you're also like, you love people.
Yeah.
You love to engage with people and you know what I mean? And create that environment. Like, how long did it take, do you think, in earnest for you guys to get that community over here? Because you feel it when you're over here. And when I interacted with your customers for hours, you could feel it.
Yeah.
How long did that take, would you say?
I mean, I feel like the building blocks of the community started pretty quickly. The first thing, because the shop was much smaller and we just had we had like 6 seats in the front, maybe 6 in the back.
Yeah.
And there was a little humidor. The humidor space was in between with the hallway. And the first thing that I noticed was a massive issue of segregation. So we would have the blacks would be in one side and the whites were in the other.
Really?
Which for me, I was glad they were coming, but I never felt good about that. It always felt
awkward.
It felt awkward and segregated. So I actually began to observe who the leaders were in those groups, and I would bribe them with cigars to go sit or to create conversations. Oh, wow. And I was secretly working in the background of giving them free cigs and like, hey, do this, meet this guy. I'm always like, meet this guy, do this. And eventually that barrier began to break down to the point that it's non-recognizable now. I mean, it's a very blended group.
Yeah.
Of course, as the shop has changed, now we're getting really, really younger smokers that are coming in their mid-20s and they have way more money than I do, you know? And and now that's been kind of fun because now we're integrating them into the older community and at the same time teaching them about cigar culture. And they kind of know they want to do it because they've seen cool people that make money do it, you know?
Right.
So now we get to kind of like branch out and meet them in that space, which has been fun.
That's one thing I notice when I travel around a lot is that cigars bring people together of all different backgrounds and, you know, whether it's socioeconomic or diversity. That's one of the things that I love the most about cigars. I mean, are you finding that to be, I mean, how is that? What are some kind of parallels or similarities between your life here and your life as a pastor? Yeah.
Well, so when I used to travel quite a bit, I traveled when I worked in music, I traveled loads when I did ministry stuff. Once I started smoking cigars, I would look for lounges to go to, and I would go when I traveled. So I got to visit a lot of lounges, and most of the experiences were not positive for me. It felt awkward or isolated, or like, the needle scratch on the record when you walk in and people are looking at you like, who are you? And so I started observing after a while that actually I didn't feel that the cigar culture was super inviting to newcomers.
Interesting.
Some shops are very high scale, very classy. And so if you don't dress a certain way or look a certain way, you don't feel welcome. And so what I was noticing is you have the older retired guy and their shop closes at 6 and no one in there is going to talk to you because they don't know you or they don't know who you voted for, right? And then you have like the really high scale, very fancy, very posh place. So I was also thinking like, could you create a space where affluent people mingled with lower middle class people, or even the guy smoking a bundle stick because it's all he can afford? So it's a bit of a dream. That's one reason why we did pick the neighborhood that we were in.
I was going to say the neighborhood has a lot to do with that potentiality 100%. To create that.
Plus the rent was cheap,
back then.
Back then it was, yeah, not anymore. But,
right.
I mean, I actually had a lot of guys I first met in the industry that really discouraged the vision of it. Like they didn't feel like it was going to work. And
why is that?
I think just because it wasn't really being done before. And now 11 years in, I can walk into other spaces and see that there are people who have caught that same vision. And I'm not saying that I'm the curator of that, but someone else is thinking along the lines that I was thinking. And I think ultimately, as far as the cigar industry, that type of welcoming, inclusive environment is what's going to help keep the industry flourishing and profitable as well, as it's welcoming new people, especially as divided as the world is right now, Right. And we've got a few rules we use, it's like we ask people to be respectful. We don't take away their freedom of speech, but it's like, hey, when we're talking in the cigar, when the cigars are lit, we're here. The rules are all things can be said in love, or in respect of other people. And it's unbelievable actually how easy it is when people step away from like the propaganda and the fear mongering that we see every day on the media. We were talking before we started about bad news, right? So when you disconnect people from that and you get them in a different environment, I see people's behavior like totally change. So cigars could save America. There we go. There's a t-shirt.
100%. I always make America smoke again.
Yeah.
I would always say
that'd be a great t-shirt.
If you have people that have differences of opinion or you need to solve a problem, just put them in the same room, give them cigars, and say, just talk with civility about it and figure it out. And, because I remember when we when we first started CAO, you remember near the Capitol at Morton's, how many times would we entertain politicians?
Every Friday, they'd be coming
all
over
the state
into our little office. They would, and
you smoke cigars with them. And then they're like, you know what, man, I understand this guy's perspective. I know where he's coming from. I know he's trying to, you know what I mean? He's got elected by his constituents. He has a vision that he wants to exit. But, you'd end up like finding that you have more in common
100%
than you do not.
Yeah.
But the cigars kind of helped.
It's the common denominator. I always say the cigar is a common denominator. It's like if you could be from one socioeconomic background, I could be another. I could be a bricklayer. You could be a doctor. But what are you smoking? Oh, really? You like Fuente? Oh, you should. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like it breaks down the walls.
What am I smoking?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just because Tim gave it to me.
That's a blend that I brought from when we were in the DR.
It's a surprise, and we don't.
It's a surprise blend. I don't even know exactly what's in it, other than tobaccos that I like.
Going back to that point of creating that environment where you kind of broken down the walls successfully. Do you find it more challenging in other areas? Geographic locations, because you do have other Smokers Abbeys, and people that don't know, you've got one in Gallatin, which is maybe 30 miles northeast. You've got Austin, Memphis.
Yeah.
So is there more of a challenge in those other places to create that same environment?
Well, it's interesting because Austin and Memphis are both franchise stores, so I don't own them, but we work together in partnership. part of that agreement is that there is a culture that is expected to be delivered to the customer, because I think the culture is sort of what makes us unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm talking about preserving a brand, I want to preserve the culture of that cigar lounge. And I think both of those stores do a very good job of protecting the culture, but at the same time, they have a very unique freedom to express themselves how they are. So like Austin looks, I mean, it kind of still has a Smokers Abbey feel. Actually, Austin store is incredibly a beautiful space. It's one of the most beautifully built and crafted spaces that I've ever been in. They kind of took my vision and even elevated it, which is really cool. But the Austin culture is going to be different than the Memphis culture. So Memphis is in Germantown across from IKEA, and they have a very different clientele. They kind of keep different hours. They carry different products. So there's the freedom for them to kind of mold that. And for the two stores that I have, you have East Nashville, which is a much more like arts, music, creative, progressive vibe, a melting pot. And then we have Gallatin, which Gallatin tends to be more conservative. It tends to be filled with guys who like to kill animals for food and sport. You know, we get a little more indie music down here. We get a little more Metallica up there. Luckily, I like both. So, it's good. And so a lot of vets, a lot of veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So the culture in 30 miles is so different between the two stores. So we've had to, even in our own model, adapt the culture of those stores to meet the needs of the people who are there. And that's kind of what's good. So it's, there are some hard, fast rules, but then there's a lot of flexibility to like make that experience what it needs to.
What are your kind of, if somebody wants to open a Smokers Abbey, what do you say? You have to, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's philosophical. Is it also aesthetic?
Yeah, there's an aesthetic. The aesthetic is kind of warm, friendly, man cave, hunting lodge with a little bit of weird art vibe. But it can be expressed however. I like a clean shop. So cleanliness is important for me. I want people to feel comfortable and not like you already got to maybe shower the smoke off when you get home. You don't want to shower the ash and the dirt from the last 12 people. And I find smoke shops in the country disgusting. Most of them are uncomfortably dirty. So I like cleanliness and the vibe, but for the most part, like, don't be a dick, don't be a dick and hold your customers a priority. So like valuing human life and dignity, respecting all people. We all have to work on lowering our judgment. I've had guys come in really high-end sport car and they look nice and they got off from work and they want the cheapest smoke you got. And I've had guys that look like
it's because they're leasing that sports car for $1,500 a month.
Yeah, that's
why.
probably it.
Yeah.
And I've had guys that look like they're been wandering the streets for a while and they'll drop $30 on a stick, So it's like, it's not my space. It's not my place to judge people. So we try to have an openness of like, let's try not to prejudge this person. Let's see what their needs are. Let's hear them. Let's see them. Let's interact with them. I think that was something I picked up in a culture of a lot of lounges that I visited, was sometimes the guy behind the counter portrays, you have inconvenienced me by coming in here today.
I've been to stores like that.
And you're like, I was like, oh man, this guy, now I got to see what he wants, and I'm like, I never ever want somebody to feel that feeling when they walk into the store. So that's, we also like, we're not the upsell guy, we're not trying to like get the most money out of you. What I want to know is, what do you need and can we fulfill that need? Because no one has to have a cigar, especially in our economy, right? Nobody has to have that. No one is, if they're coming here, they're fighting the parking lot, the traffic, they're getting outside their bubble, turning off Netflix to come in here, then I want to find out, why did you come? What are you looking for today in that experience? So those are kind of hard, fast rules, you know? And then the rest of it is like, be creative, try things that don't make sense. We've done so many events in this place that don't make sense from a cigar perspective.
For an example.
Well, like, let's use a Crown Heads example. But Andy comes up to the Gallatin shop, and we're trying to think, we've done many Crown Heads events. So we're like, how can we make this event a little bit special? And he said, what if we buy a tent that people ice fish in? I didn't even know what it was, because there's no ice.
I saw the
here.
picture of it. I didn't know what it was either.
So it's a tent that you can buy online, a couple $100, and it pops up, and then you can cut your hole in the ice, and you can, you know. So I'm like,
people actually do this.
I literally responding to him like saying, we don't have any ice. Like, he's like, no, we're gonna turn it into a portable outdoor smoking lounge, so that guys that don't have a warm place in the winter to smoke in. So he showed me the picture. I'm like, cool. So he buys the tent and a little blaster heater and a folding chair. And I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. And it was like, especially the guys up in Gallatin, they went absolutely nuts.
They actually, like, you don't actually fish. It's just the environment.
Yeah, it's just creating a warm space.
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, protecting you from the elements.
Yeah.
So there's a warm space. And not only did we give that thing away, and people were sincerely bummed who didn't win it, that some of them, I had several wives that came in and was like, hey, can you tell me what this thing was? I'm going to buy it for my husband. Because, I mean, like, these guys went home and they were seriously sad that they didn't get this. And I thought, man, whatever. I would have never thought about it. We did an event where we took frozen turkeys and we bowled, and people won cigars. We were throwing frozen turkeys across the parking lot. And,
so funny.
You know, that was like just super weird. We've done karaoke nights that got out of hand.
I love that. I love karaoke.
It's fun.
You do. I cannot stand karaoke.
I
but
love
I've got
it.
some
I think
people
it's
that
great.
We've done karaoke parties, and man, people love food. Food brings everybody together.
Yep.
So we've had some great catering things, and you know, it's just get as weird as you can. I like it when companies come up with programs, but we just come up with a bunch of our own programs, you know.
Your programs are much more creative than most of the.
Yeah, because after a while, you know, you can only get so many free lighters or, you know,
polo shirts, hats. I shouldn't.
But also, I think out of the gate, you were very, it's part of like one of the things that you kind of seem to pride yourself on is that, you know, we curate and carry cigars that are boutique brands, that are smaller brands.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like what led to that choice and that philosophy, and how do you think that's, I mean, I assume that you think that choice has worked really well for y'all.
Yeah, because your assortment at Humidor is much more eclectic than the average, which I love, by the way.
Wow, that could be a whole other podcast right there, that question. In a nutshell, I was talking with a brand owner the other night who was sitting in here, and he asked me, how do you define boutique? And I was like,
good question.
I don't know at this point, because the industry's changed a lot. I started out with the boutique thing because I honestly didn't know. Well, to be fair, when I really first started, I didn't know that I was going to have to run a business. For me, I looked at it more as a fun thing to connect people. And then after a while, I was like, crap, this is not easy. And I'm going to have to become a business guy, you know? And so initially the boutique thing was, it was what I smoked. It's what I liked. And I tend to like that product better than some of the more corporate based things. And I mean, you know, I won't get into anything that's going to get us censored here, but I will say that one of my favorite boutique brands in the world got really diluted when a big corporation bought it.
I understand that.
And
I understand that sentiment.
It fundamentally transformed my life in a negative way.
Yeah.
So it like created this, it's a thing that I still bitch about all the time to everybody is even to that corporation who I do a lot of business with, like to the point that they come see me, like, thank you for your business. And I'm like, well, I'm needing to pay bills and survive,
Mm-hmm.
So the world's different. I will say in the boutique world, boutiques have become so trendy and kind of cool that there are a lot of really small brands now that I don't want to break any more brands. And, it's like, so I'm trying to find the balance.
Yeah.
How do you provide cigars that people really recognize? And you got to do that nowadays so you can stay open.
Yeah. Right.
And I can't mentally and emotionally do a hard hand sell for every customer. And that's what the first 5 years looked like, was every single sell was a hard hand sell of a boutique. So I've had to let some of the big boys come in, and they have made me money so that I can continue doing what I'm passionate about, which is like Gallatin's a great example. When we first opened there, we just started with big boys. We have 2 humidors. One's got big boys, one's got boutiques. So when guys come in, they drink beer, and I say, there's a difference between Budweiser and a craft beer. Yeah, cigars are similar. So we have Anheuser-Busch over here. If you like it, we got it. We're going to sell it to you. We're all leaving happy, okay? But if you are a personality that leans into the craft side a little bit, I want to introduce you to some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So over the last few years, now I'm seeing guys that would never have gone in there, go straight in here. In this store, we get a lot of visitors, and it's surprising to me on a Friday how many people will literally come straight from the airport to this store, which I love. I think it's so beautiful. And when they come in, and I know they haven't been here, I always tell them, we have curated an experience for you. If you are open to exploring new things, you're going to see stuff you don't recognize. And just let's talk about it. We'll tell you what it is. We'll give you some recommendations. But we also have some things that you recognize you probably smoke at your house in Nebraska. So you're welcome to have that too, if that's your comfort, And so, yeah, the boutique thing is weird, because who were boutiques when I started, like Crown Heads? I don't know. I mean,
would you still classify Crown Heads as boutique?
Weird. I actually think what I did is added a phrase. I call it Uber boutique, and then there's boutiques. So I think you guys are boutiques because you're not owned by a megacorp,
right?
So I can't we're all corporations now. We're Americans, but I can't call you a big corporation store. So, but you're not Uber boutique.
Yeah.
People know the brand.
Give me an example of what you would classify as Uber boutique.
Uber boutique, maybe like a GTO.
Never even heard of it. So to your point, there must be Uber boutique, because I'm not familiar.
Uber boutique, I think, is like you still have 1 or 2 guys that are repping the whole store, the whole nation, and they're just trying to get placements wherever they can.
Wildfire, I
would say, is a good example of Uber boutique. I mean,
Jeremy, I'm a fan. I love Jeremy.
Oh, I'm a huge fan too.
It's fantastic.
So, like, for me to get onto, like, they're only a few years old, but for me to get onto a brand and really support it, and actually, if you go in there, you're going to see a lot of facings of his stuff. Then I have to be connected to the person. I got to be connected to the product. And I think, and I brought this up to one of the corporate guys. He says, it's not ideal, but why hold a grudge? I said, it's actually, I don't hold a grudge because of what you do. It's what you've caused other people to do. Because now these boutique guys, it's a brand new cigar. I've never heard it. And the guy goes, oh, try my new Maduro. It's $14.99. Okay. So no one knows you. You have a Maduro, which everyone has. And you got it made where everybody else got theirs made. But it's $15. And that's where I got to start with somebody, now. And so because of the pricing, I don't have to tell you guys the pricing of manufacturing, the boxes and the tobacco and the rolling and the whole packaging, all the expenses have gone up. And the big corporations, they own a lot of it, you know? So they know how to finagle. They're getting the best price. So they got a better margin, you know, for their product. So the little bitty guys are really having to put out really expensive cigars. Well, now you're competing with Plasencia. You know, I had this conversation with a guy. I said, you've given me a cigar. I've lit it, smoked it. It's a good cigar, but it actually costs more than a Plasencia. And you have no marketing, you know, and I don't want to be that guy because I was a punk rock guy. I'm the punk rock guy. Let me be fun punk rock guy, you know, but it's like, now I don't know how to necessarily sell that product because the industry's changed. And then guys like you have actually become national names and people recognize it. And you've done the PR and the media and the podcast, and you're working all the time for that name recognition. Another example is back when I first started, it was very common for people to do these exclusive things. Hey, we're going to only let you sell, you know, whatever. Caldwell was a good example. Back in the day, it was I think it was the first store in Tennessee to have Caldwell. Really early on, the business wasn't that old. So I'm carrying it. And the guy working for them, the rep, was like, you got the exclusive, you're exclusive, you're exclusive. So I call him up one day. I said, look, can we kill the exclusive thing? Can you get your guy to go out here in Nashville? I want you to sell this cigar to every single person. Here's how you're going to sell it. Tell him this. I gave him my numbers. I said, this is what we're selling. This is how it's being received. This is bad business for me, but it actually was good because my sales with them doubled once people in Nashville saw it over there and saw it over there. Because you know how smokers are, they go everywhere.
Right.
You know, they go around, they're curious, they explore humidors all over the city. So I said, can we kill the exclusive thing? So that's not a pitch for me. You come and say, you're getting exclusive. I don't want it. I don't want it. Because now I'm doing all this extra work to promote your brand. Nobody knows what it is. And nowadays, even more so than even 10 years ago, it's way harder to launch those names and those brands. So if I get an Uber boutique like Wildfire, I'm going to work really, really hard to build that brand and to make that a thing that people recognize. And you have support and you have people that you connect with. And there's also so many options now for tobacco. There's so many people putting out good tobacco. I don't have to work with you if you're a jerk. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If you're a jerk, I don't have to work with you. And I love that freedom of like finally getting big enough where I'm like, I don't have to carry your product because I don't really like you as a person. You know?
Yeah.
I'm not connecting with you on any, you know, real place. And also, and I'll tell this story real quick to your fans. I know I'm talking too much, but
no.
John, I don't know if you even know this, but when we first opened, we were so broke. John invited us to the store, over to the offices over at Oz, and he gave us product. He filled our humidor with product and said, no, you're having a hard time. Here's the product. We'll just settle up when you can settle up. And I was like, nobody in the world was doing that for us. So like, to me, it wasn't just like, oh, this dude's helping me out. But I mean, like he had the belief to say, these guys might be around in a few years, you know, I'm going to sow into that. And so I love that. And I don't see that level of commitment to the retailer from a lot of brands. So I've always appreciated that. And that's why no matter what, I'm like, I'm loyal, bro. I'm loyal.
Yeah. That goes a long way. I did an event in Maryland with Feeney and Chris Helmuth. They have a store called The Humidor over there. And I had no idea, but they told me a similar story that my dad did for them.
Oh, yeah.
Where they had a previous manager who was no longer with them that bought too many pipes and humidors and cigars. And so this might have been when we first did CAO. And they said, you know, we'd love to carry your cigars, but, you know, we're sitting on all these pipes and humidors. And so my father sent them cigars and said, don't worry about it. I believe in you guys. You just pay me back when you can pay me back, and on no schedule, not anything like that. But it's incredible to me that, like, you know, 30 years later, that they said that that's so meaningful to us that, I don't know, it created a bond and a loyalty that that has endured they never forgot it.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I was fortunate enough to work for your dad. And I think that's where I got a lot of my personal philosophy in the business and treating people the way you would expect to be treated. Because, I mean, John was such a unique individual, rest in peace. He was just such a spiritual guy that, I mean, what I learned from your dad was so much more than just the cigar industry. It was just, it was life, you know?
Well, and I think to go back to what we talked about from the beginning is like the believing in people. It makes sense that you wanted to start with boutique companies, because when I think of boutique, I can think you can pick up the phone and get that person with one phone call on and talk to them about anything. And it's a relationship. Since you're a people person and you're big in relationships, I think it's just, it's an easier relationship in that sense, as opposed to like dealing with, corporations. You think of the layers that you have to go through. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Another thing I love about the industry is it is relationship driven still to this day.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been doing this half my life, and that aspect has not changed. I mean, there's other things that have changed with social media, marketing, conglomerates, what have you. But at the end of the day, it's still a relationship driven business. Our relationship with you guys, your relationship with your customers that walk in looking for a cigar, it's all on how you treat people.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint, I'm curious. Somebody asked me this question about our art center because we had celebrated our 10th year. But I thought it was a good open-ended question that I'll ask you. Is that, you've had a lot of years now and experiences, and you've done a lot of things and evolved a lot. What would you say is your best business decision that you've made during that period of time?
Wow. I don't know if I have ever made a good business decision.
Well, I can give you like my what I noticed is that I've noticed from traveling a lot is that people, if you create an environment, which you've done here, like the bar that you have over here, which obviously a lot of people enjoyed, especially when I was doing that event, during I mean, I was here for quite a while. That has added an element to your business, that you didn't have before.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to leave it open-ended and broad, not
beer
just
and liquor. So great. I'd say probably the best investment that I've made is probably employees.
People.
Is back to the people. And it's funny because I got several guys that own businesses, and a lot of them own restaurants. A lot of restaurant owners love smoking cigars. And they always ask me, why are the same freaking people here? My turnover's like insane, And I'm like, well, first of all, it's not the worst job in the world to have. But like, I feel like when my guys come to work, they feel like they have purpose, like they're doing something that's important. And so I think that's, like going back to the culture. I was up in Gallatin, and one of my employees, Jordan, was working, and I see him chit-chatting. It was a lady buying a pipe. She's buying a pipe. And I thought, well, that's cool. Lady smoking a pipe. Oh, that's pretty rad, So I'm kind of watching them, and next thing I know, I'm like, see him take his wallet out, and he's handing her like $20. So now I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And so I'm like, hey, what is that about? Because I was like, he's like, well, she needed cash. And so she wanted to get cash out on a purchase because she needed some cash to give to her kid or something. I don't know. And I told her our machine, we couldn't do it. Like we didn't really have a way to do it. So I just gave her the cash. Said,
solid.
You can give it back to me later. So I'm like, first I'm like thinking, what is this interaction? This is strange.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, it's generosity and kindness. Like, and I'm kind of like, well, okay, cool. So if you come to Smokers Abbey, don't ask for any money, okay? But I was like, I was genuinely kind of moved by like, wow, that's
just a good dude right there.
Yeah, and he's just like, it doesn't matter. It's just a few bucks. So she'll bring it back to me or she won't. And I think like that, I'm very grateful. I mean, I'm very grateful for the employees that we have. And they're still here. Like 11 years, some of them.
That's awesome.
Have worked, they're here, and we pick up a few more, but so that's been a good business decision. And I think part of that is just having intuition of like who's going to work in the vision. Beer and liquor is great. Good margins on it. Helps you stay afloat, Of course, once the liquor came in, that's when my mother said, she called the Abbey the House of Sin, which is great,
It is kind of contra when you think about it, because if you look at the decor and everything, and
it is.
And then it's like, oh yeah, let me get a shot, whatever.
Yeah.
But also you have people that are over here that are, they're connoisseurs, you know what I mean? So it pairs well with the cigar. So
that's right.
In that instance, it fits. I never thought that was, you know what I mean? Off brand or anything like that. So it's interesting that you're in East Nashville, Gallatin, Austin, Memphis.
Yeah.
These are cities that, like, when you look at them, there are a lot of similarities, particularly when you think of like, music, art, culture, history, and kind of background in music. Particularly when you think of Austin and Nashville, there are a lot of similarities and parallels there. Is it something that you've thought about? Like, what are some similar kind of areas or markets to Nashville? And is that like a good, do you know what I mean? Is that kind of part of the secret sauce that
I think a lot of it was accidental. I don't know that I can take credit for it, but it's also the relationships I already had with people, and I already knew people that lived in creative communities, so it just sort of worked out in that way. But I mean, as far as cities,
like I could see this working like in Brooklyn.
But I could see this working in New Orleans, for example.
Right. Yeah. But I couldn't see it working in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because we're just too regular.
I know. I see this has got like a Brooklyn kind of a vibe or whatever. You know what I mean? That you could see that. But
I mean, we're probably like we're like maybe Asheville, North Carolina cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
This would definitely work in a community like that too, I would think.
Of course, it's interesting because my experience with Gallatin, I'm thinking like Dollar General now. It's like there's a lot of smaller bedroom communities of larger towns that don't really have that kind of engagement because there really wasn't anything up there for them. So it was a super risk of like, and we don't stay open as late there. I mean, we close at 9 or 10. Now it's sort of getting into the 10 to 11 o'clock. But most people wake up in the morning, they work hard, they drive an hour to work, and then they come home. Yeah, you know how it goes. It's a commuter town. It's a bedroom community. So they're not out super late, but when they are out, like Fridays are wonderful. Just starting as soon as work gets off. The place fills with people, a lot of camaraderie and connection and unwinding from the week. And, then all my elderly vet guys come in on Sunday mornings, because they haven't been to church in years. But then when church is over, all the Catholics show up, and I got tons of Catholics. The priest will come in with a bunch of guys, and they will sit around and talk about all the things they talk about. So
you had a story that you told that I'm going to ask you to share when I was here doing the event with you guys, where speaking of spirituality, where you had famous cigar smoker Reverend Al Sharpton came over here to smoke a cigar. Can you tell that story? Because I think that story is really interesting.
Yeah, I think Nate was here. He was doing a commencement speech, I think, for TSU, if I remember correctly, and got off the airplane, him and his bodyguard, just two of them, and they came in. This is when we were really small. They came in and they got a cigar and sat in the back, and Nate's texting me, dude, and super pleasant.
So you interacted with him then?
Yeah, very briefly, but super, super pleasant, very unassuming, very grateful to have a quiet space to have a cigar, Yeah. Not uppity, and it's like, most people want the VIP lounge, or they want like, I don't want anybody to talk to me. And it was just a very like, I'd never been in here. He just was like, I want a cigar. I've been on a flight. I want a cigar. I want to just unwind before I go to this school and give a speech, you know? And I thought, wow, what a cool sort of risk you took. Just
how did he find out then about Smokers Abbey?
It was probably just Googling it or something, just putting it on the internet.
What did he smoke? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but Rain Man, right, might remember. Do you
Nate,
remember,
what did he
Nate?
smoke?
I know exactly, which is kind of ironic. Mason Dixon.
Oh my God.
He smoked Mason Dixon.
That was a limited edition.
Yeah, that was in 2014-15. We did 2 runs, and then
Which that makes sense because we opened in 2013.
Yeah.
And it was we were really small back then.
Yeah,
very
yeah.
small. See what I mean about Nate remembers the most
That's
random stuff?
definitely Rain Man.
Yeah.
The other irony is the only other
definitely
place-
Mason Dixon. Yeah.
The only other place I've seen him is I saw him at remember Grand Havana Room when it was open in New York, which
Yeah.
is famously I mean, talk about like high end and members only. I mean, that's what that place was. I mean, you couldn't get in there unless you were a member or you knew someone that was a member.
Yeah.
But I would see him like on occasion we'd be over there for after a
Big smoke
or something. And then you would see him. He was kind of like a staple guy in there smoking it. So it's kind of, I thought it was cool to hear that he came here.
We were in the middle of the remodel and we couldn't afford to close. And I mean, we're grinding mortar on the floor at night and trying to clean up dust before we opened. Like we never shut for the remodel, tearing out the wall and everything. We had plastic sheets hanging down. There's rubble everywhere. And freaking Ron White walks in, the comedian. He walks in, he's doing a show at T-Pack or somewhere. And I was so embarrassed because he's was really well-known cigar smoker, super chill, got a cigar. And I'm like apologizing. I'm so sorry, Mr. White. Like we're remodeling and we can't afford to close. And, and he's like, oh, here, hand me that folding chair. And literally pops open a folding chair in the middle of us doing construction. I mean, it was so dusty. We had plastic over the cigars in the humidor, like to try to protect them. That's how crazy it was. And he didn't give no cares. He just sat in a metal chair and he chatted with us and smoked his cigar and then went off to his show. And I was like, wow, okay.
Cool.
I mean, because if you got somebody that's got a little recognition, you want to like kind of make him feel at least comfortable. And he's sitting on a metal fold-out chair. No cares in the world. And I thought, now that's a real cigar smoker right there.
Yeah.
That's a real cigar smoker.
Cool story.
One thing about you guys that I appreciate, and you mentioned it earlier, is that your kind of ethos or prioritizing like customer relations, customer service.
Yeah.
There was a conversation that I found myself like in the middle of at our trade show recently with some manufacturers, and they were sort of talking about there's some tobacconists that they just, they buy your product, they put it on the shelf, and they expect it to kind of sell itself.
Yeah.
And so there was, it was an interesting conversation that lasted longer than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
But can you talk about that? Because I think it's an important dynamic. Is that still part of the MO here? And how did you kind of adjust and change it from you just doing it? I assume that, you obviously your employees are very knowledgeable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you talk about that approach?
Well, the cynical side of me is when I said, I don't want to break any more brands. And I don't mean that in a, look at what I can break your brand. It's like, no, I worked too hard for some of your brands and you gave me no support, and you thought because you have a box with cigars in it and because like some of the guys, their main goal is to get it on the shelf, but then getting it on the shelf is step one, because the worst thing you can do is let a cigar sit on a shelf. So you've got to move that thing out. Now I'm going to move it no matter what. Even if I'm putting it, I've got a really great 5-pack in there. I've got a really great sample pack. And that sample pack has been the way that I get rid of your shit.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and my customers like the sample pack because they don't care about, my guys, they don't care as much about the brand. They just want to try different stuff, smoke different things. There's not bad cigars in there. If they were bad, they wouldn't have made it on the shelf.
Right.
But they're just product that no one knows. And again, they're competing with price and they're competing with marketing and conversation, you know? So, but I think like one thing I've noticed on the rep level, because I interact with reps more than I do owners, obviously, that reps have kind of figured out now that if they don't move that product, they don't sell more of that product. And then as hard as I work to get it in the customer's hands, reps work very hard to get it on the shelf. So if they have broken the first barrier, which is to get it on the shelf, I think reps now, good reps, realize they're responsible to an extent to help move that product along. And so I'm just really blessed right now with a bunch of great reps that if they're seeing it slow, then I've had reps like just come in for the afternoon and pull stuff out and pull cigars out of their pocket and just say, you got to taste this, you got to try it, you know, because they do understand that exposure is like you coming in to do the event. Because one thing I noticed, because we have such young smokers, this is why I wanted you to come, because the old timers remember you. The new guys don't remember you.
Yeah.
So it's like having you customer facing, you sharing your knowledge of the tobacco industry and your experience and the things you learned from your father. Those stories are important so that the younger guys will go, oh, I recognize that. You know, I recognize that brand. I understand there's history there. It's not just another boutique guy that's, you know, and that's the thing I tell people about your brand. This is not just a random product that someone got a little money and decided they wanted to be in the cigar industry, and that happens. So this is history. This is history. This is knowledge. This is long-term connection. This is deep roots in Nashville. And those are the selling points, you know? And so having you there, so that's support, because if you're 22, 23, and you see your brand, it's not much different than some of the other boutique brands. If they've never smoked it, they don't recognize it. They don't have history. They don't understand the history. So sharing history and sharing those stories are important.
Yeah.
Too.
So it feels like it's obviously it's a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know that. You got to feel like you're getting support from the companies or the brands that you're dealing with. Yeah. You know, and also you're sort of have set it up so that when an event comes or happens over here, that you've set it up for, you know, the highest impact it could possibly have. Yeah.
And going back to wildfire, like even a guy as small as Jeremy, who's working by himself in California, you know, that crazy RV he has at the trade show.
I love that.
He had it hooked up to his truck and he drove from California to Nashville. And he spent 7 days with us. So he did an event at each one with the RV, and we had a campfire and we cooked hot dogs and he told stories and but he didn't just do that because he so wants to make the impression. He spent a day before the event. He did a follow-up day. Oh, we had an event the last day. He hand sold. He told stories for 3 days at each store. That's 6 days that he worked, you know, which is, in my opinion, far above and beyond what anyone else would normally do. But he was making those personalized connections. So and it wasn't just cigars. It's not just like, oh, here's a human being for me to sell a cigar. They talked about bands, talked about favorite TV shows, you know, made human connections. Again, it was really good. So there are some people out there, and see, hunger creates great marketing opportunities, you know, because some of my best ideas came when I was the most desperate to pay rent, you know, and I see some of the young guys that are really desperate to become successful. And that's the business mentality. If you just think you're going to be successful because you did a thing, you're going to fail, you know. But if you actually have doubt in a way that you're not going to succeed, or the competition's too great, or maybe you don't have what it takes, you dig deep, you get creative, you work extra hard, and then you start to see movement. So a lot of our success was really because we had 6 or 7 years of a lot of failure, you know, a lot of stress and anxiety, and oh my gosh, can I pay the rent? And call the landlord, can you give me an extension? Like, you know, just.
But you don't give up. You don't quit.
But you don't.
You
give
just
up.
keep digging.
Yeah,
100%.
In fact,
that's really good.
When I'm out in my art studio making art, I leave out there, like Mr. Rogers, my old Crown Heads hoodie that says "Carve Your Own Path." It's got. I think I showed it to you one day.
It's shredded.
It's shredded. It's got holes in it. Now it's become my official hoodie because it gets chilly at night. and I'll be out there. And if I'm out there my hoodie stays out there now in the art studio, so I'm getting paint on it and everything. But that mantra for me actually helped me get through a lot of years, because no one was coming to save me. Nobody's coming to save me. If I want to see the vision happen, I'm going to have to work for it. I'm going to have to carving a path is fucking work, right? It's work. It's not like, hey, look what cool thing happened. No, it's like, I'm going to dig through the rock. I'm going to get through from one side. And that's one reason why I never threw that hoodie away, because from an inspirational point, I wore that to work for years, thinking about the mantra of I've got to carve this thing. It's not just going to open up for me. So
what kind of art do you do?
Formally trained slasher art. I usually say it's the art of a kindergartner within like a psychopathic rage.
So it's paint. It's painting though.
It's paint. Yeah, acrylics and spray paint. And
how long have you been doing that?
Since I recognized that I needed to manage mental health. I only do it to have another form of finding rest from
another release.
Yeah.
Do you still, are active in your pastor work too?
Well, every time, and this has been my story forever, every time I try to get out of it, it comes back so in some form or fashion. I'm not officially preaching at a church anymore, so that closed for me last year, which took me 5 years to wind that down. But like, I'm going to Boston this weekend to do a service for a guy in Boston, and in a couple weeks I'm speaking at another church. So if there's an invitation, then I go.
Anybody ever ask you to marry them? Like, you know,
dude,
all the time?
I've done probably like 68 weddings.
Oh, wow.
And I've done now 4 or 5 in the cigar industry.
Oh, wow.
So I've become kind of the cigar industry marry guy for this area.
Did not know. That's pretty cool.
Reps, employees at other stores. Actually, your employee, Andy, I married Andy and Mary.
Did you marry him?
Yeah.
Did you really? I didn't know you did the service.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll be damn. Okay.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, because I got married right before he came on board.
Yeah, just right after. I think he was with us for like a couple of weeks, and then they got married, I think in Fairview.
Yeah.
Oh, so you married him?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not married to Andy, just
I'm
to be
definitely
clear.
not married to Andy.
But he performed the service.
And also, if you come to Smokers Abbey, I'm not doing your wedding. Well, wait a minute. It depends on how much money you have. It depends on how much money you're paying. Maybe. Let's say maybe. Let's leave it in the maybe place. But it is funny because we've now had 2 weddings in Gallatin in the store. We've actually used the store for weddings, which is so weird, man. People, and part of it, I think, is that, you know, church used to be such a meaningful space to a lot of people. And now it's like, oh, the cigar lounge. It's the Abbey. It's it's a place of my spirituality and my connection. And so what better place to get married than a cigar lounge? Well, I can think of a few.
It's the sanctuary.
It's the sanctuary. That's right.
It feels like a lot of your customers, they come here and they stay, they hang out. It's not as much of a grab and go type of a scenario.
No,
is that
grab
right
and go
or no?
pays the bills though, doesn't it?
Oh, so it's both. So you
It's
still have both.
And the grab and go is the warm weather, right? That's why I love the warm weather, because I'm like, I want to have a 30-second cool interaction with you and get paid so I can pay rent, but then everybody else hangs out. You know.
So it's more like it depends on what time of the day. Really, it sounds like also.
Yeah, and the
weather.
seasons. I always tell people cigar season is April 1st to October 31st.
I see.
That
PCA,
for
make a
Tennessee.
note of that.
Yeah. Yes. Cigar season's April 1st.
Yeah, starts April 1st.
Starts.
Not
That's the beginning. Like
in
the
January through
when
March.
I'm looking at first quarter, it's like, oh, maybe we should close. And then second, you know, you start getting into the April and you start seeing a little tick, 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 tick. And you're like, okay, maybe we won't die.
Right.
And then October rolls around, right? I mean, literally after Halloween, done.
Yeah.
Done. So my last big events are usually in the end of October. We usually have a big blowout and try to start moving inventory so we can get that floor tax taken care of in Tennessee. And You get a little bump at Christmas, but it's not insane for us. And then,
Black Friday for me was always the cutoff.
That's the cutoff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Speaking of cutoff, you guys are going to be opening soon, so maybe we should let you do business.
We can make a little money.
Make some money. It's been great, man. It's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Always learn something whenever we speak.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your thoughtfulness in your approach. I think it's unique and it stands out. And part of what I love about the cigar business is that it brings people together that you may otherwise not interact with. Yeah. And I'm always a big fan of that.
And is there no better example than this place? It's very cool.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
It's genuinely very humbling. I appreciate you guys bringing me on.
Absolutely, man.
Plus, I love sharing the vision, man.
Yeah.
Share the vision.
It really defines culture. It's very cool.
Would you ever, last question, I guess, is do you find yourself like wanting to do more of Smokers Abbeys, or what, how do you kind of, you know what I mean? And is it a franchise type of situation all the time, or is it?
At any given time, I've got 2 or 3 people that I'm talking to. So we've got a couple of stores that maybe in the next 12 months we could see in the franchise department. And I myself would like to open more. It's always a month, the kitten, the inspirational poster with the kitten on the string. Just hang on. That's like from the 90s. That's me every day. So we're just hanging, the little kitten's just hanging on, but
it's your next tattoo.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I'm just hanging on. And when opportunity comes and the timing's right, I'd like to open up more stores. I like that.
Cool. Well, you've done a great job here. Yeah. Congratulations with everything, and
thank you.
Much continued success.
Thanks for spending your time with us.
You got it. Absolutely.
Everything.
Appreciate it, man. So that's going to be a wrap. So until 18, keep smoking Crown Heads, keep smoking Oz Family cigars. Check out the Abbey if you're coming to Nashville, because I know a lot of people come to Nashville. Smokers Abbey, 604 North Gallatin Avenue in the heart of East Nashville. Have a good one.